All right, let's dive into a film from way back in 1936 that, believe it or not, has so much to say about our world right now. I'm talking about Charlie Chaplin's masterpiece, Modern Times.
And yeah, I know what you might be thinking. A comedy from 1936? A silent film? I mean, it's almost 100 years old. What could it possibly teach us today? Well, as we're about to see, the answer is a whole lot.
See, this is way more than just a bunch of slapstick gags. There's a reason the source material for this explainer calls it a timeless cinematic masterpiece. Chaplin was a genius at blending laugh-out-loud comedy with some seriously sharp social criticism. One minute you're laughing, and the next you're really thinking. So here's how we're going to break it all down. First, we'll look at the big theme, man versus the machine. Then, we'll get into why it was such a big deal to make a silent film back then. After that, we'll talk about the story's humor and heart. And finally, we'll tie it all together and see why it still matters today.
All right, let's jump right in with our first section, man versus the machine. This is really the core idea of the whole film. Chaplin is taking a hard look at the industrial world, and, well, he's not exactly thrilled with what he sees.
So the film introduces us to Chaplin's famous character, the tramp, and he's stuck on this factory assembly line. And his job is just mind-numbing. All day long, he just tightens the same two bolts, on and on and on as they fly by. It's such a perfect and kinda hilarious picture of just how repetitive modern work can be.
And this whole idea gets visualized in one of the most iconic scenes in all of movie history, the tramp. He gets literally swallowed up by the gears of this giant machine. He becomes just another part of it. I mean, it's funny to watch, but it's also a pretty terrifying metaphor, right? It shows how we can get completely consumed by the very systems we're supposed to be a part of.
So underneath all the laughs, Chaplin is making a really powerful point. He's talking about dehumanization, about unemployment and poverty. Remember, this was during the Great Depression. And about how we can lose our own sense of self in a world that's just obsessed with being faster and more efficient.
Now, what's so cool is that this critique wasn't just in the story. It was in how he made the movie itself. Which brings us to our next section, a really bold creative choice called The Sound of Silence.
Okay, you have to understand, by 1936, movies with sound, talkies, were the standard. That's just what people expected. But Chaplin, he deliberately made Modern Times almost completely silent. So why would he do that? Well, he was convinced that he could say more with physical comedy and visual gags than anyone could with words. He thought it was a more universal language. And honestly, it was a totally defiant and brilliant move. And here's the kicker. The few times there is sound, it's used so cleverly. There's this one unforgettable scene where the tramp finally has to sing a song. But the words? They're complete nonsense, just a jumble of sounds that sound like different languages. The whole point is communicated through his performance, not the lyrics. It perfectly proves his point about the power of action over words.
Okay, so the film is smart. It's technically brilliant, but it wouldn't be a classic if it didn't have a massive heart. And that brings us to its emotional core, which is all about humor, heart, and hope.
The whole thing is really anchored by this beautiful relationship between the tramp and a young, homeless woman he meets, a character they call the Gayman. She's just as lost in this crazy modern world as he is, and the bond they form, that's what gives the movie its soul.
So what are they fighting for? It's not riches or fame. It's actually something really simple. They're just trying to survive. They dream of having a small home, a decent life. You know, some dignity. In a world that feels so cold and mechanical, all they're looking for is a little bit of compassion, and somehow, together, they find a way to hang on to hope.
And this relationship, this human story, it's the perfect balance to all that sharp satire we talked about. It's this powerful reminder that even when the world feels like it's falling apart, human connection is what really matters. At the end of the day, our humanity is stronger than any machine.
Which brings us to the big question, the one we started with. Why does this film, from 1936, still feel so incredibly relevant today?
Well, if you take just one thing away from all this, it should be this single powerful idea, which is summed up perfectly in our source review. Progress should never come at the cost of human dignity. That's the movie's message in a nutshell, that our push for new technology, for more efficiency, it can't be more important than people.
So when you look at it, Modern Times is a masterpiece because of how it weaves these three things together. You might start watching for the slapstick comedy, right? But then you get pulled in by the really smart social critique.
And what truly stays with you long after the credits roll is that deeply human story at its heart.
And it all leads to this final iconic shot. I mean, it's one of the most famous endings in cinema. After everything they've been through, the tramp and the gamin have lost it all, again. But they still have each other. And they just smile, hold hands, and start walking down this long, empty road into a future they know nothing about.
It's such a beautiful, hopeful, but also kind of sad ending, and it leaves us with one last question to think about. As we navigate our own modern times, with all our anxieties about AI, about the changing job market, about just trying to find our place in it all, you have to wonder. The tramp and the gamin walked off toward an uncertain future. Just how different is ours?